Hi, my name is Ava, and I'm 28 years old. Ever since I was a little girl growing up in Savannah, Georgia, I dreamed of having the perfect wedding day. A beautiful ceremony, heartfelt vows, smiling guests, and most of all, my family by my side. But I never imagined I'd end up planning it without them. Either have a proper wedding with everyone invited, or we won't be attending, my mother, Sylvia, said coldly. Her words weren't just an ultimatum. They were a wound. Still, Jake and I decided to move forward. We planned an intimate ceremony that cost nearly $300,000. Everything, the venue, the food, the music, reflected who we were. But their absence on that day carved out a quiet space in my heart. I never expected that a few wedding photos would change everything. I grew up in Savannah's most prestigious neighborhood, where image was everything. My parents, Sylvia and Edward, weren't just wealthy, they were old money. Our home was a Georgian colonial masterpiece with antique furniture no one could sit on and gardens that looked like museum pieces. Everything about our lives was designed for appearances. My father, Edward, was a senior partner at one of Georgia's most respected law firms. My mother was constantly managing charity boards and social events, calculating social currency based on who wore which designer to what gala. My sisters, Chloe and Paige, embraced that world without question. Chloe's wedding to a banking heir lasted 3 days and had over 400 guests. The Savannah Post called it the event of the season. Paige's wedding at the Fairview Estate Club was just as extravagant, complete with Dutch imported flowers and a 10-piece orchestra. I was different. I chose social work in college instead of law or business, which horrified my parents. What's the point of a degree that doesn't open the right doors? My father said over my graduation dinner, his tone full of disappointment. My life changed the night I met Jake. It was during a fundraiser I organized for a local homeless shelter. My mother only came because she thought homelessness was fashionable that season. While she networked, Jake was stacking chairs in the corner, chatting and laughing with the shelter residents. Jake didn't come from money. His father was a math teacher, and his mother was a nurse. He had built his own small architecture firm focused on sustainable design. When he asked for my number, my mother whispered, "He seems nice, dear, for volunteer contact." But Jake didn't see my last name, he saw me. Over 3 years, we built a life filled with honesty and warmth. His family welcomed me like I belonged. Sunday dinners at their modest home were loud, real, and full of love. When Jake proposed during a quiet hike, using a simple heirloom ring from his grandmother, I said yes with tears in my eyes. That night, we celebrated over dinner, and I was glowing with joy. I couldn't wait to tell my family, foolishly thinking they'd be happy for me. But when I called them, reality hit hard. "I'll call the Fairview Estate Club tomorrow," my mother said instantly. "They're booked years out, but the Harrisons owe me a favor." "Actually," I said gently, "we're thinking something much smaller. Just around 50 guests." "Don't be ridiculous, Ava," she cut in. "We know exactly what a Montgomery wedding should look like." After I hung up, Jake squeezed my hand. "That went better than I expected," he said with a smile. But I already knew what was coming. The following week, Sylvia invited us for a formal dinner. My father was there, as were Chloe and Paige with their husbands. Sylvia's personal assistant was present too, apparently to coordinate with the wedding planner. They opened a $600 bottle of champagne like this was a corporate announcement. Before I'd even finished my salad, Sylvia slid a thick binder across the table. "Preliminary guest list," she said. 357 names. And that's just the essential ones. Jake tried to stay calm. "We're really thinking of something much smaller. Something meaningful." Edward frowned. "This isn't about meaning. It's about legacy. You know how many business deals begin at weddings." "With all due respect," Jake replied, "we're not getting married to host a networking event." That's when the evening fell apart. My mother played guilt trips. My sisters pressured me with comparisons. They insisted I'd regret not having a wedding that matched Montgomery's standards. That night, Jake and I walked through Savannah's town square under the streetlights. "They care more about what it looks like than what it means," I said quietly. And that's when we knew If we wanted a wedding that felt real, we'd have to give up the family that couldn't accept it. And we did. The pressure didn't stop. Every day brought a new email from my mother, lists of venues, grand ballrooms, or high society country clubs. Each option was more extravagant than the last. My father casually mentioned that he had already told several of his clients about our wedding. Chloe sent me her wedding planner's contact info 3 times. Paige forwarded photos of designer ball gowns, each one grander and more over the top than the last. Meanwhile, Jake's family remained gently supportive. A wedding should reflect the couple, his mother, Linda, told us one evening over dinner. Whatever makes you two happy is what matters most. The contrast was striking. On one side, constant pressure to perform. On the other, peace and quiet support. The stress started seeping into my sleep. I had nightmares of walking down an endless aisle with hundreds of faceless guests staring at their phones, not even noticing us. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, with Jake gently holding me and whispering, "We don't have to decide everything right now." But deep down, we both knew my parents saw every day without surrender as a form of defiance. One afternoon, I met my mother for lunch, hoping for a calm conversation. She didn't come alone. Sitting beside her was a high-society wedding planner who barely acknowledged me and kept referring to me as the bride instead of by name. "The bride will definitely want imported orchid arrangements," she said, flipping through her glossy binder of photos. Something inside me cracked. When I got home, I collapsed on the couch. "I can't do this anymore," I told Jake, my voice shaking. "Every conversation is a battle. I don't even recognize myself in their wedding plans." Jake took both of my hands and looked into my eyes. "Then let's stop fighting. Let's decide what we want and move forward with that. No more defending ourselves. Let's just plan our day." "They'll be furious," I warned. He nodded calmly. "Probably. But whose life is this? Whose day? We're not doing this for them, Ava. We're doing this for us." That was the moment everything changed. The next morning, we sat at our tiny kitchen table, notebooks open, coffee going cold. Outside the window, autumn leaves were swirling through the yard, while inside, we were making one of the most important decisions of our lives. Jake asked, if we could design our perfect wedding day without worrying about anyone else, what would it look like? I closed my eyes and let the image form. Somewhere beautiful and natural. No country clubs. Maybe something by the ocean. Only people who know us, who really care. 50 guests tops. Jake smiled and scribbled into his notebook. "What about the experience itself? Quality over quantity," I said without hesitation. "I want amazing food people will actually remember. Music that means something. Details that are personal and thoughtful. I'd rather give 50 people an incredible experience than host 300 strangers I barely know." With every sentence, the weight on my chest started lifting. For the first time since we got engaged, I felt genuinely excited. "We should talk to a planner," Jake said. "But not a society planner, someone who specializes in small, high-end events." Through a colleague of Jake's, we found Alexandra Kane, a luxury event planner known for her discretion and incredible attention to detail. She had designed intimate weddings for celebrities and political families who wanted privacy and elegance without spectacle. We met her in her downtown Savannah office. She was calm, professional, and precise. We explained everything, our values, our families, the kind of celebration we envisioned. "So you want an intimate gathering," she summarized, "with absolutely no compromise on quality. A wedding that prioritizes experience over guest count." "Exactly," I said. "Budget isn't our primary concern." That was technically true. Jake and I had modest savings, and we were planning carefully. What we didn't know then was that a twist of fate would soon give us financial freedom we hadn't anticipated. Alexandra pulled out her tablet and showed us her past work. Exclusive venues that weren't even listed online, world-class chefs who only took on private events, and entertainment options that would be impossible with a traditional wedding crowd. When you redirect resources from accommodating hundreds of guests into a curated experience for a select few, she said, the possibilities become extraordinary. By the time we left her office, our vision had come to life. Now came the hard part, telling my family. We decided to tell them in person, out of respect, and honestly because I wanted to give them one last chance to support me. They thought we were coming to confirm their plans. Sylvia had gathered everyone in the formal living room, my father, Chloe, Paige. They were seated like a tribunal, smug and expectant. "We've made our decision," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're having a small ceremony, 50 guests, in a location that's meaningful to us. We've hired a planner who specializes in this kind of event." My mother's smile froze on her face. "That's not possible," she said sharply. "We've already discussed this." "No," I said quietly. "You discussed it. We're telling you." "This isn't just about you, Ava," my father said, his tone slipping into courtroom authority. "This is about family tradition, legacy, standards." "I understand that's how you see it," I replied. "But this is our wedding, our marriage, our lives." My mother started to cry, loud, dramatic sobs. "After everything we've done for you, the embarrassment, the people will have to tell they aren't invited." Edward's reaction was colder. "If this is your decision, then you can pay for it yourselves. Don't expect a penny from us." Chloe looked at me like I was pathetic. "You've always had to be different, haven't you? Even if it hurts everyone around you." "It's selfish," Paige snapped. "You're putting your personal preferences over family unity." I stood up. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is the wedding we want." Sylvia wiped her tears, suddenly calm and cold. "Then let me be clear. If you go through with this scaled-down affair, we will not attend." I looked around the room. "Is that how you all feel?" One by one they nodded. I forced a smile. "Then we'll send the invitation soon. I hope you'll reconsider." As we walked out of that house, the one I had grown up in but never felt truly at home in, I finally let myself cry. Jake held me on the front steps, silent and strong. "We could still compromise," he whispered. I shook my head. "No. If they really loved me, they'd be there. They're the ones making this conditional, not us." We walked away hand in hand, knowing that whatever came next, we were choosing something real. A week after that painful confrontation, Jake and I were still adjusting to the silence from my family when something unexpected happened. Jake received a letter from the estate attorney handling his grandfather's affairs. His grandfather had passed away 6 months earlier, and the inheritance had just cleared probate. Jake opened the letter at our kitchen table and sat there, stunned. "He left me almost $500,000, he said slowly. "He always told me, build something meaningful when the time is right." And just like that, our modest wedding budget was no longer a limitation. It felt surreal, almost like the universe was saying, "You made the right choice." With that financial freedom and Alexandra Kane's guidance, our vision evolved from meaningful to extraordinary. The first major decision was the venue. We toured several private estates along the coast before falling in love with one in Monterey, California. It was a secluded cliffside property with panoramic ocean views, terrace gardens, and a modern glass structure that felt like it floated above the water. The estate belonged to an art collector who rarely rented it out, but after hearing our story and seeing Alexandra's portfolio, he agreed. "This setting speaks for itself," Alexandra told us. "You won't need much decor when the world already looks like this." Next came the food. We secured Chef Marcel Laurent, a 3-Michelin-starred chef who rarely agreed to weddings. His condition? Complete creative control over the menu. We didn't hesitate. "I want to tell your story through food," he said during our tasting. "A culinary journey, East Coast meets West Coast, sustainable ingredients, your memories on every plate." The result was a 7-course masterpiece. There was even a reimagined version of the pasta Jake and I ate on our first date. Each course had a story, and the wine pairings were just as intentional. We chose a champagne so rare only 2,000 bottles existed in the world. The invitations became works of art. We commissioned a master calligrapher to handwrite each one on handmade paper. The envelopes were sealed with custom wax stamps and placed inside carved wooden boxes. Each box held a tiny glass vial of salt water from Monterey's coast and a note explaining why we chose that venue. Alexandra said, "The invitation should feel like the first experience of your wedding." Our florist, Paolo Gardano from Italy, created something beyond floral design. He made botanical sculptures. "I want it to feel like the earth itself is celebrating your love," he said through his translator. Orchids, rare blooms, and living plants would flow through the ceremony and dining spaces as if they belonged there. The dress was deeply personal. I visited several designers, but found nothing that felt like me until I met Eliza Chin, a rising designer with a passion for storytelling through fabric. Over 6 fittings, she crafted a gown that was elegant and meaningful, embroidered with symbols from our relationship: waves, olive leaves, tiny architectural motifs in honor of Jake. The silk was sourced from a Japanese mill that had supplied fabric to royalty. Jake surprised me with custom jewelry from a local artisan, ethically sourced sapphires that matched the ocean at our venue, and a bracelet with tiny details inspired by his architectural sketches. "I wanted something that's uniquely you," he said. "Not what someone else thinks you should wear." For music, we brought in a string quartet from Vienna for the ceremony and cocktail hour, and later, a jazz ensemble that usually played in exclusive clubs in New York and Paris. The cake, designed by a renowned pastry chef, appeared simple but held layers of complexity. Each tier told a story, from our first date to the moment we decided to walk away from tradition. Every decision was purposeful. We weren't spending to show off. We were investing in an experience for the people who truly supported us. But the absence of my family was a constant ache. I kept sending them updates, photos, plans, notes, hoping they might soften. Sylvia's replies were short and cold. "Seems excessive for such a small event." My father didn't reply at all. Chloe and Paige responded occasionally, but never with interest. Jake's family, on the other hand, became our foundation. His mother helped us track RSVPs. His father, Tom, crafted wooden signs for the ceremony. "You're our daughter now," Linda said during one planning session, hugging me tightly. I started therapy again. My therapist helped me see that I was grieving, not just the absence, but the fantasy of a family that would choose love over image. "You're mourning the parents you wish you had," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean you don't deserve joy." Jake was always there. Patient, steady, loving. "We're building our own family," he said. "One with no conditions." As the RSVP deadline approached, I checked the mail every day with less and less hope. Friends responded with handwritten notes and excitement. But 4 envelopes, sent to my parents and sisters, remained unanswered. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, I received a short email from my mother. "We've decided to maintain our position on this matter. We wish you well, but will not be attending." No apology. No warmth. Just finality. That night, I cried in Jake's arms. I cried for the little girl who had once dreamed of her mother, helping her into her wedding dress. I cried for the woman I had become, standing alone in the face of her family's judgment. But when the tears stopped, I felt clarity. They weren't coming. And that meant I was finally free to fully embrace the life and the wedding I was choosing. 2 weeks before the wedding, I decided to make one final attempt at reconciliation. Not because I felt guilty, and not because I doubted our decision, but because I knew that, deep down, I still wished my parents and sisters would choose to show up. I didn't want to look back and wonder if I could have done more. I drove to my parents' home on a Tuesday morning. It was Sylvia's administrative day, the day she handled correspondence and event planning. Their housekeeper, Maria, was surprised to see me but gave me a warm hug and quietly disappeared into another room. Sylvia was in her study, wearing her reading glasses and surrounded by gala seating charts. She looked up, expression unreadable. "Ava, this is unexpected." I sat down across from her desk. "The wedding is in 2 weeks. I wanted to talk to you one last time." She folded her glasses with slow precision. "I believe we've made our position clear." "You have," I said calmly. "But I'm asking you to reconsider. Not for appearances or social standing, but because I'm your daughter. And this is one of the most important days of my life." For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe regret. Maybe confusion. But then it was gone. You made your choice, she said. You chose to break with family tradition, to have a scaled-down gathering instead of a proper wedding. That was your decision. Yes, I said. But it was never meant as a rejection of you. It was a decision about how Jake and I want to start our life. A decision about authenticity. She began straightening papers that were already perfectly aligned. We won't be attending. It would send the wrong message about what this family stands for. As I left their home, the home that never really felt like mine, I understood something clearly for the first time. For my parents, the appearance of family mattered more than the actual bond. And that realization, while painful, was strangely freeing. That evening, my phone rang. The caller ID said Madison, my older sister. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up. I wanted to call rather than text, she said awkwardly. About the wedding. My heart lifted, hoping she was having second thoughts. I wanted to say that I understand why this matters to you, she said. And part of me wishes I could be there. You can be, I said softly. Your invitation is still open. She sighed. You don't understand what it would mean, Ava. Going against mom and dad like this, the consequences wouldn't be temporary. So you're choosing their approval over supporting your sister? I said quietly. I'm choosing family peace, she replied, her voice tight. Something you never seemed to value. The call ended shortly after that. I sat there, staring at the phone, finally accepting that even those who claim to understand sometimes lack the courage to act on it. With my biological family stepping back, Jake's family stepped all the way in. Linda arrived a week before the wedding to help with the final arrangements. She came with me to my final dress fitting, a moment I had always imagined sharing with my own mother. When I stepped out of the dressing room, she gasped. It's absolutely stunning, she said through tears. Jake won't know what hit him. My best friend Jessica, who had been a constant source of support, organized a spa day with the women who had truly been there for me, my chosen family. It wasn't a traditional bridal shower, but it was everything I needed. Laughter, peace, presence. Family isn't always about blood, Jessica said as we sat poolside. It's about who shows up when it counts. My bachelorette weekend wasn't a party in Vegas or a night of drinking. It was an intimate retreat in Napa Valley with 6 women who knew my soul. We shared wine, stories, old memories, and the hopes we had for our futures. On the final night, we sat around a fire pit, and Jessica raised a toast. To choosing your own path, she said, raising her glass. And to finding the people who walk it with you. Unexpectedly, a few extended relatives reached out during that final stretch before the wedding. My mother's cousin Margot, long considered the family rebel, called to say she admired my courage. The Montgomerys have always cared more about how things look than how they feel, she said. I'm proud of you for breaking the cycle. Even my father's brother, Uncle James, sent a heartfelt note with a generous gift. Every generation must define family in their own way, he wrote. Be happy. These small acts of defiance against the family narrative meant the world to me. They were reminders that even in a legacy of control, there were glimmers of love, too. The night before the wedding, we held our rehearsal dinner at a boutique restaurant in Monterey with our wedding party and closest loved ones. The absence of my parents and sisters hung in the air, but only briefly, because what filled that space was something stronger. Jake's father stood to make a toast. When Jake first told us about Ava, Tom said, his voice warm and full, he said he'd found someone who saw the world the way he did, with honesty and heart. He looked at me with kind, tearful eyes. Some people who should be here tonight aren't. But please know, Ava, that our family is now your family. Without conditions. Without expectations. That night, as I lay in bed in our bridal suite overlooking the Pacific, I finally felt calm. Yes, there would be empty seats tomorrow. But every person who would be there had chosen me. Not out of obligation, but out of love. I sent Jake a message before bed. I can't wait to start our family tomorrow. He replied instantly. We already have one. Tomorrow we just make it official. I fell asleep smiling. The morning of our wedding arrived with the kind of crisp clarity you dream about. The sun rose over Monterey's coast in golden streaks, the sky flawless, the ocean calm. From the balcony of my suite, I watched the final touches being made on the property below, staff moving with grace and precision, the floral arrangements taking shape, everything unfolding like choreography. Jessica arrived first, carrying a tray of breakfast and a bottle of champagne. "No stress today," she said, popping the cork with a grin. "Only joy." Unlike the chaotic mornings I'd seen during Chloe and Paige's weddings, rooms full of people, loud voices, assistants rushing, I had chosen something different.
Peace. Space. Time.
The hairstylist and makeup artist, both flown in from New York, worked quietly and thoughtfully. "You should look like yourself on your best day," the makeup artist said gently as she brushed a hint of shimmer onto my cheek. "Not like someone else entirely." I asked for minimal makeup, just a natural glow. No heavy lipstick, no dramatic eyes. Just me, comfortable and glowing. When my dress was finally zipped and the custom bracelet Jake had made for me was fastened around my wrist, Jessica stepped back with her hand over her mouth. "Ava," she whispered, "you're breathtaking." I turned to the mirror and looked at myself. The gown moved like liquid silk. The embroidery, the waves, the leaves, the symbols Jake and I had chosen together, glimmered subtly in the sunlight. I didn't feel like a version of someone else. I felt like me, fully and completely. Our photographer, Isabel Monroe, was already there capturing the details. She worked with the elegance of a storyteller, not just a documentarian. "These are the images that tell the real story," she said, snapping the in-between moments, the quiet laughter, the look in my eyes as I adjusted my veil. At 1 p.m. sharp, I made my way toward the cliffside garden for the first look. Alexandra had planned the timing to perfection. The light hit just right, soft gold pouring over everything. The string quartet began playing a soft instrumental version of the song that had played when Jake and I first met. Jake stood with his back to me at the edge of the garden, looking out over the sea. When I tapped his shoulder and he turned, his expression broke into emotion. His eyes filled. "You are everything," he whispered, taking my hands. We stood there for several minutes, just being. Isabel captured the moment from a respectful distance. Every part of it was exactly what we'd hoped for. Intimate, genuine, unscripted. Our portrait session after that was dreamlike. We wandered through the estate's blooming gardens, paused under trellises draped in florals, and walked barefoot along the lawn's edge, while Isabel snapped shots that looked like they belonged in a painting. As the guests began to arrive, they were greeted with welcome drinks served in hand-blown glass flutes, each one chilled with floral-infused ice spheres. The string quartet played a gentle background as guests were guided toward the ceremony space, a glass pavilion overlooking the Pacific, transformed by Paolo's floral vision into something almost mythical. Instead of traditional rows, the seating was arranged in a soft semicircle, so everyone had a perfect view. Cream-colored silk chairs, soft lighting, and curved edges made the space feel like a warm embrace rather than a formal aisle. From behind the curtains, I could see Jake taking his place at the front, calm and radiant. Our officiant, Dr. Charles Bennett, Jake's mentor from college, stood beside him, his presence grounding and wise. The quartet transitioned to our processional song, a string arrangement we had chosen together. I took a deep breath and began walking alone. I had decided not to have anyone replace my father. This was my choice. My moment. I walked with intention, my eyes fixed on Jake. Not once did I think about who wasn't there, only who was. The ceremony was short, but powerful. We had worked with Dr. Bennett to create a service that reflected our values: commitment, growth, honesty. It wasn't filled with fluff or performance. Just the truth. Jake's voice trembled slightly as he read his vows. "I promise to build a life with you that's full of meaning, not appearance. Of substance, not show." Mine followed. "You stood beside me when choosing truth meant losing people I once believed were essential. You helped me realize that real love isn't conditional. It simply is." When we exchanged rings, his a brushed platinum band with a hidden inscription, mine a delicate piece that perfectly complemented his grandmother's engagement ring, I felt something inside me click into place. When Dr. Bennett pronounced us husband and wife, and Jake kissed me, the small group of guests erupted into cheers. It wasn't polite applause, it was raw, honest celebration. The cocktail hour flowed beautifully. Canapés were passed on trays like tiny sculptures. The bar served custom cocktails named after milestones in our relationship. Master sommelier Thomas Gilbert personally presented the champagne. This vintage is only produced during exceptional years, he explained as he poured for each guest. 2008 was one of their finest. Just like today. As the sun began to lower, our guests were led to the dining pavilion, walls of glass surrounding a single long table where everyone would sit together. No head table. No hierarchies. The golden hour light streamed in as guests took their seats beneath a canopy of chandeliers that seemed to float above the table. Every detail, hand-painted chargers, Venetian crystal stemware, gold-plated flatware, was curated with love. The floral runner wove through the center like a story, echoing the blooms from the ceremony. At each place setting was a handwritten menu and a small gift, a crystal paperweight containing a miniature sculptural rendering of the Monterey coastline. Jake's father had worked with a local artist to create them. I glanced at the 4 empty seats where my parents and sisters were supposed to be. For just a moment it stung. But Jake squeezed my hand under the table and smiled. No words were needed. I wasn't alone. Dinner began, and Marcel's 7-course masterpiece unfolded like a performance. Each dish was paired with a story, a memory, a moment from our journey. From the first course, a delicate fusion of East Coast and West Coast flavors, to the final bite of our first date-inspired pasta, everything was intentional. Every guest seemed to understand that this wasn't just a meal. It was a celebration of us. As the sky darkened, the space began to glow. Hidden lights warmed the glass pavilion. The gardens beyond twinkled with thousands of tiny lights, and the stars began to appear above us. Jake stood and offered a toast. He thanked every guest by name. When he came to the part where my family would have been acknowledged, he paused. We also want to thank those who couldn't be here. Every relationship in life teaches us something. And sometimes the hardest lessons are the most valuable. There was a long silence. Then applause. Not just for Jake, but for the truth he had spoken out loud. The evening continued with elegance and delight. A surprise opera solo brought many to tears. The jazz ensemble filled the space with warmth. At 10:30 p.m., guests were invited outside for what they assumed would be a sparkler send-off. Instead, fireworks exploded over the ocean, gold and silver choreographed to our favorite songs. The reflections danced on the waves as Jake and I held each other, surrounded by light and love. At midnight, a final surprise. A drone show lit up the sky above the estate, forming constellations, ocean waves, and finally, our initials entwined in glowing arcs of light.
People gasped.
Some filmed. Some simply stared. And I stood there, watching it all, knowing this day had become something even greater than I had imagined. We hadn't just had a beautiful wedding. We had started a life, our way. The celebration lasted well into the early hours. As guests danced, laughed, and shared quiet conversations in candlelit corners, I found myself soaking in every detail like snapshots in my mind. Jake laughing with his college friends. Jessica dancing barefoot in the grass. Linda and Tom watching everything with peaceful smiles, as if this was exactly how they had always envisioned their son's wedding. When the last guest left and the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, Jake and I stood hand in hand at the edge of the cliffs, watching the waves crash below. Any regrets? He asked softly. Just one. I said honestly. That my family chose to miss this. Not for me, but for them. They'll never know what they gave up. He nodded. Their loss. Not ours. As we walked back to our suite, I felt something profound settle inside me. I wasn't carrying the weight of their judgment anymore. I had laid it down. 3 days later, Jake and I boarded a private seaplane for our honeymoon, 3 weeks on a secluded island in the Maldives. As the California coastline disappeared behind us, I felt an unexpected peace. No more tension. No more waiting for approval. Just the two of us, starting the next chapter of our lives. Our villa sat at the far end of the island, with its own private beach and infinity pool. With no television, no obligations, and limited internet, we disconnected completely from the outside world. It was the first time in months I felt fully present. At night, we lay on the deck staring up at the stars. "I've never seen anything so clear," Jake whispered. "It's like the whole world opened up." That clarity followed us in every conversation. We talked about our future, not in the abstract, but in real terms.
Kids.
Home. What kind of parents we wanted to be. What kind of life we wanted to build. Without my family's expectations clouding my vision, I could finally hear my own voice clearly. A week into the honeymoon, I received an email from Isabel, our photographer. Despite our limited signal, I couldn't resist opening it. She had sent a preview gallery, 10 curated images from the wedding. Jake and I sat side by side in silence, scrolling through the photos. There we were in the garden at golden hour, tears in our eyes. The guests laughing under the chandeliers. The fireworks lighting up the night sky. Isabel had captured not just the beauty of the day, but its heart, the emotion, the intimacy.
The joy.
"These are extraordinary," Jake whispered. "They tell the whole story." After discussing it together, we decided to share a small selection on social media. We rarely posted personal updates, but this felt different. We chose 10 images and added a single caption. "The beginning of our authentic life, together. Thank you to everyone who chose to stand with us." Within hours, even with the spotty connection, our phones lit up with notifications. Messages poured in from friends and extended family, some who had been invited, others who had heard about the fallout. Many commented on the beauty, but more than that, on the feeling the photos conveyed. They said it looked like something out of a magazine, but more heartfelt, more real. 2 days later, I received a surprising message from Paige. "Those pictures are stunning. The venue looks incredible." It wasn't warm. It wasn't apologetic. But it was the first non-critical message from her in months. I replied simply, "Thank you." The next day, another surprise. An email from Chloe. It was longer, thoughtful. There was a hint of something close to regret. "Your wedding looked absolutely breathtaking. Every detail seemed so personal. I've never seen you look that happy. Part of me wishes I could have experienced it in person." I responded briefly, but kindly. I wasn't ready to open my heart to them just yet, but I also didn't want to close the door. Then came the most unexpected message of all. While Jake and I were enjoying a private dinner on the beach during our final week, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I wouldn't normally answer while on vacation, but something told me to pick it up. "Ava, it's Elizabeth Warren from Savannah Living," said a polished voice. "A colleague forwarded your wedding photos to me. We'd love to feature your celebration in our annual, most exclusive weddings issue." I blinked, stunned. She went on to say that the combination of the breathtaking venue, the story behind the guest list, and the artistry of the execution had caught their editorial team's attention. "Your wedding," she said, "is exactly what luxury weddings are evolving into: intimate, meaningful, and unforgettable." After discussing it with Jake, we agreed. We gave her access to Isabel's gallery and shared some quotes about our planning process and values. 2 days before we returned to the U.S., I received one final message, this time from my mother. "Just saw your wedding will be featured in Savannah Living. Call when you're back." No congratulations. No reflection. Just a prompt. But for Sylvia Montgomery, even that was monumental. When we returned home and settled into the mid-century house Jake had been renovating, we were greeted not by anxiety, but by calm. We unpacked, cooked together, and started our married life on our own terms. 3 weeks later, the issue of Savannah Living hit newsstands. Our wedding was featured in an 8-page spread titled, "Intimate Luxury, the New Standard." The article praised the vision and execution. Alexandra was quoted discussing how Ava and Jake Montgomery had prioritized meaning over tradition. Isabel's photos spoke volumes, joyful, raw, elevated. Industry experts called it trend-setting, and suddenly, the thing my family had dismissed as too small, too untraditional, too embarrassing became the event everyone was talking about. The next morning, my phone rang again. It was my mother. The next morning, my phone rang. The screen lit up with my mother's name. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello, Mother." "We saw the magazine," Sylvia said, her tone measured and precise as always, though this time there was something else in it, uncertainty. "Your father and I would like to invite you and Jake to dinner this weekend." I didn't answer right away. My heart was thudding, not from excitement, but from caution. I had waited months for some form of outreach, some acknowledgement of what had happened. And now that it was here, I didn't trust it. "What's the dinner about?" I asked flatly. There was a brief pause on the line. Then she said, "I think we may have misunderstood your intentions." The article made some points that are worth discussing. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to one I had ever heard from her. After talking it over with Jake, we agreed to go, but only under clear conditions. No shaming, no backhanded comments, and absolutely no expectation of us coming back into their traditional mold. The dinner was held at my parents' home, just like old times, except everything had changed. The table was perfectly set, the silver gleamed, the food was elaborate, but the air was tense. My father stuck to safe conversation, asking about Jake's architectural projects, our honeymoon, the housing market. Sylvia stayed quiet for most of the evening, offering carefully crafted comments about how impressive the feature was and how tastefully everything had been executed. Eventually, she turned to me during dessert. "The venue looked extraordinary in the photos," she said. "And the chef, 3 Michelin stars, yes? Quite an accomplishment." As we spoke, I realized something. This dinner wasn't about emotional reconciliation. It was about reputation. Our wedding had been labeled a success, socially, aesthetically, publicly, and now they wanted to realign with it. My father finally broke the surface tension. "It seems we may have misinterpreted your vision," he said. "We thought you were settling, cutting corners. We didn't understand you were creating something so notable." Jake, calm as ever, replied, "We weren't creating it to be notable. We were creating it to be meaningful. The attention was just a side effect." Sylvia set her coffee cup down with careful precision. "Nevertheless, families should be present for important occasions. Perhaps we were hasty." I didn't respond right away. I had spent months grieving their absence, rebuilding myself, redefining what family meant. And now that they wanted back in, I wasn't sure if I was ready to let them. Still, I saw it for what it was, not a full apology, but a first step. And for people like Sylvia and Edward Montgomery, even a partial admission was revolutionary. Over the next several weeks, a slow, cautious re-entry began. Weekly family dinners resumed, guarded at first, polite, measured. No one talked about the argument. No one addressed the months of silence. But my voice, once dismissed at that table, was now listened to, tentatively, but noticeably. Chloe and Paige also began to reach out. At first, it was superficial, sharing photos of their kids or passing along recipes. Then, one day, Chloe invited me to lunch. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. After some small talk, she finally looked me in the eye and said, "I should have been there." I didn't speak, letting her continue. "I knew it was wrong to miss your wedding. I just didn't know how to go against Mom and Dad. I didn't have the courage." "Why now?" I asked. She looked down at her untouched coffee. "Because the wedding turned out to be socially acceptable. And that made me realize what I gave up by trying so hard to keep their approval." It wasn't everything I needed to hear, but it was more than I expected. Over time, the dynamic in our family began to shift. Not dramatically, but subtly. My opinions, once brushed aside, were now occasionally sought. Sylvia, still obsessed with appearances, began referencing the Savannah Living article with pride. "Of course, Ava's wedding set a new trend," she'd say to guests. It was ironic, but I let it slide. The biggest shift came 6 months after the wedding. Jake and I hosted a dinner at our new home, a warm, casual gathering of friends and family. For the first time ever, my parents, my sisters, Jake's parents, and our chosen family all sat together under one roof. After dinner, my father pulled me aside on the patio. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began, his voice lower than usual. "We realize we've been rigid, maybe even too rigid. Watching you do things your way and succeed has made us think about what kind of legacy we're actually leaving behind." It wasn't a full transformation. My parents were still who they were, traditional, status-focused, emotionally reserved. But that night marked something new: mutual respect. They weren't just tolerating me. They were beginning to see me. As Jake and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary, we sat on the couch flipping through Isabel's photographs again. The glass pavilion, the ocean view, the way the light caught the embroidery on my dress. Jake looked over and asked, "Do you think they would have come around if the wedding hadn't been featured in the magazine?" I paused before answering. "Honestly, probably not." He nodded. "But that's who they are." I smiled. "And I'm done trying to change them." As our first year of marriage continued, I found myself reflecting not just on the wedding, but on everything that came after: the subtle shifts, the new boundaries, the emotional evolution that had slowly taken root. Jake and I weren't just building a life. We were building something more sacred than tradition: trust, honesty, and mutual respect. Over the next few months, Jake's architecture firm expanded, and I launched a small community initiative to provide mentorship to young women navigating difficult family dynamics. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was real. Just like our wedding. Just like our marriage. Sometimes, I would receive messages from acquaintances, people I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me they had seen our wedding feature in Savannah Living and how inspired they were. Not by the glamour, but by the choice to stand up for what we believed in. It gave me the courage to say no to things I never wanted. One woman wrote, "I finally realized I didn't have to live for someone else's expectations." That was the unexpected ripple effect of telling the truth. One afternoon, while organizing a box of wedding mementos, I came across the original RSVP envelopes we'd mailed to my family. All 4 were still sealed, unopened, unsent, untouched. I stared at them for a long time before placing them back in the box, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of where the story had started. We hadn't just survived their absence, we had thrived in it. Holidays were still awkward. My parents continued to host formal Thanksgiving dinners and invite us with stiff emails. Sometimes we went, sometimes we didn't. When we did, Jake and I stayed close, polite but distant, no longer seeking approval. My mother made passive comments about what I wore or who I spoke to. My father kept the conversation focused on business or politics. The warmth we experienced with Jake's family, where laughter echoed and everyone brought a dish, felt worlds away. And yet, I didn't resent them anymore. I pitied them. They had missed one of the most beautiful, intentional, joy-filled days of my life because they couldn't control it. They had missed seeing me at my strongest, happiest, most authentic self. But their absence made space for something far greater. It allowed me to see who would stand beside me when things got hard. It revealed which relationships were built on love and which were built on image. It showed me how to walk forward without shrinking. A year after the wedding, Jake and I returned to Monterey. We stayed in the same suite, visited the same cliffside, and walked through the gardens where we had said our vows. That evening, we brought a bottle of the same rare champagne from our reception and sat on the balcony, overlooking the ocean. "We built this," Jake said softly, raising his glass. "Yes, we did," I replied. We toasted, not just to our anniversary, but to everything that had led us there. The tears, the silence, the anger, the joy, the courage. And later that night, while lying beneath a sky full of stars, I realized something I hadn't fully grasped before. We hadn't just planned a wedding. We had redefined what family meant. We had rewritten the script we were handed. We had learned that standing your ground, even when it costs you, is worth it. Because in doing so, we hadn't just created a celebration. We had created a life. A life that was finally and fully ours.